I see it so often whenever I do content around superannuation. There's always the hagglers in the comment section saying that superannuation's a scam.
A Melbourne-based financial advisor has appeared in court over a superannuation collapse which saw 12,000 Australians lose more than $1 billion.
And, you know, distrust superannuation, and people commenting that as soon as they hit 60 or they retired, they pulled their money straight out of superannuation to clear off their mortgage. Where do you think, what would you put down some of that distrust to, Billy, you reckon? Do you reckon that's all forced from the government constantly making changes to the superannuation system, where there's still a lot of people that just don't understand and don't trust superannuation overall?
There's definitely a lack of understanding, but with those comment section trolls, and it's funny, so there's a guy I saw on TikTok who comes in and says super is a scam in the comment section every time I say anything about it. I saw him on other content creators, in other people's profiles, saying same thing. It's a scam, it's a scam. So it's just his full-time job, just roaming the comment section is to yell it out. I'd say most of the time, firstly, it's not someone who's...
Welcome back to the Winners Playbook. So finally, some good news out of Canberra. The government has announced updates to the proposed Division 296 superannuation tax, and the changes are significant, which we're going to be breaking down today. So we're going to be going through what's new, what it means for people with large superannuation balances, and how it ties into the way super really works as an investment structure, not just as a savings pool, but one of the most tax-effective environments for building wealth long-term here in Australia and also around the world, I would say. But before we dive into this juicy topic we've got today, Billy, what's the latest on your end, mate? Anything eventful over the last couple of weeks, or?
Oh, not too much action here, but I heard you had you got some chickens on the loose or something out at your place. So what's going on there?
Yeah, I had to get home early on Tuesday. Actually, I was at the office, and then my wife gave me a call, and so we've got a couple of chickens that we sort of free range. So they obviously are caged up at night. They've got a nice big size pen, but then during the day we let them out, and they're in an area which would be, God, how long would it be? It'd be 6 meters wide minimum by 10 meters. So there's plenty of space for chickens to roam around, but they always find the need to jump out of there. And so I've had to patch all these holes up and put fences up and so on. But then they still just figure out ways to get out. So she let him out on Tuesday, and then she went out for a walk with Leon, and then came back and couldn't find the chickens. So she was walking all around our property, all around the house. Couldn't see them anywhere. Calls me, starts looking around the streets because it wasn't the first time they've gotten out. And she's like, I can't find them. She's like, I can't find them anywhere. And so night was sort of approaching. So I think I finished the meeting at about 4:30. I'm like, all right, I'll get home. Because I didn't want to lose the chickens. So that wasn't on the agenda for that day. And I was actually driving in my court, and we're at the back end of a court. So it's quite a quiet little spot. And I was just creeping through the neighbours' yards and looking both sides as I was driving up to our house. And then I looked through these bushes to a neighbour's front yard, because they're pretty big blocks out here, and I could just see the chickens tearing up their garden at the front of their house. Awesome. And I was actually at a call and a meeting in my car at the time, so I flicked Alana and messaged him like, Alana, you got to get over to the house across the road, two doors up. So they'd come out. The front of our house got all gated off, so you can't get in, but there's a little gap on one of the side gates where the chickens obviously squeeze under. And so that's exactly what they did. They squeezed under, walked across the road through a neighbour's yard, and were just absolutely digging up a treat in their yard. So the neighbours haven't said anything yet, but they were in for a bit of a shock when we went over there and just picked up the chickens and walked back to our house. I don't think they were expecting that. So
just pick them up, or do they try and do a runner?
No, they're pretty good. Got a pretty good relationship with the chickens now. So they're pretty human friendly. So you can pick them up and sort of give them a little pat and so on. But I don't get it. They've got so much space, but they still feel the need to break out of the compound, and they go off on and do their own thing. I wasn't sure if they're pretty good at night, like with chickens. Not that we're breaking down chickens today on the podcast, but they when night starts setting in, like their senses, they're really good at like going back to bed. So I was curious to see, but I didn't want to sort of test it of if they would have known to just come back to their home, because they just wandered across the street. So I'm assuming maybe if I didn't track them down, maybe they would have just figured their way back home. But I didn't want to leave them out there because there's a few foxes and things like that around in the area. So chickens are back, and I'm still getting a couple of eggs a day, Billy. So it's happy days here.
Excellent.
All good, mate. Well, yeah, we'll dive into the topic. No more chicken talk. We'll get into Div 296, which is going to be a little bit different. But yeah, positive changes out this week, of course, which really didn't really come as much of a surprise to me, I don't think, particularly around the unrealized gains situation and change. But do you want to maybe start with where we were at up until this week, Billy, with the Division 296 changes, like what we were expecting to come in, and then we'll start breaking down what the actual changes are proposed here, because it's worthy of noting it's not passed through Senate. It's not actually legislation at this point in time, so it could still change. But where were we previously with it, and then we'll break down where we're at now and what those changes were.
Yeah, this started 2 or 3 years ago. The Labor government decided they wanted to have a go at those who have very large super balances. Because at the moment, you can accumulate as much in superannuation as you want, and the tax rate's only ever going to be as high as 15% on like the investment returns and so on that happen in your fund. And so some of those wealthier Australians, that's a nice little tax haven for them to store many millions in retirement, particularly those who went hard on super a long time ago. Like if you started pumping money into super back in the 90s when there wasn't much restriction around it, some of those people now have, in some cases, tens of millions in this environment. So the Labor government decided we need to put a bit of extra tax on this. And they drew the line at $3 million. And they said, if anyone who has more than $3 million in super, you're not going to, once you're over that 3 mil, the earnings above that level are not going to be taxed at 15%. They're going to cop an extra 15%. So it's going to be a 30% tax rate. Now, where the controversy is because, the way capital gains tax works, it's like you buy shares, you buy property, whatever. When you sell it, you pay tax on the profit. Same happens in super. It's only when you sell an asset, okay, what was the profit? Then, it will be a 10 or 15% tax rate applied. The government decided they didn't want to do it that way for those big super balances. So they're applying that tax to unrealized gains. So if you've got, let's say, 5 million in super, in a particular year, you've got a property in there that rises in value, they were going to hit the increase of the value of the property with that tax in that year. i.e. you haven't sold anything, but the value of the asset's gone up, so we're going to hit you with the extra tax. That doesn't really exist anywhere else in the tax system in Australia. Usually it's something when you sell something, you'll pay tax on the profit at that point. So that's where the controversy was. There was a huge amount of pushback, complicated to also implement that scheme. And so that's where it was at. And then this week they've come out with some changes.
Yeah, and I was doing a bit of Googling before we hopped on here, and in terms of what other countries had any sort of unrealized gains tax laws in place. And I think there was only 2 to 3 countries that have something that was similar, being Norway, Netherlands, and I think some other countries in Europe had something along the lines. Now, they don't obviously have superannuation in the way that we do, but I've seen some of the countries over there, like Norway actually has like an exit tax where the unrealized gains on like shares and assets are treated as if they're realized when you go. So it wasn't something that was very common, obviously, around the world. So Australia was going to be really pioneering the way in a bad way if they were to go through ultimately with that. But yeah, it's good to see the changes of what's come out, because that unrealized gain one was that was causing a lot of people a lot of panic, particularly those people that had property assets or illiquid assets. in their portfolios, because a lot of people run their businesses and own those assets, being not the business but the actual property that the business runs out of, albeit a doctor with a clinic or something of sorts, or farmers or people with warehouses and so on and so forth. And they were really going to possibly be up against it in terms of how are they going to fund and pay the Division 296 tax bill when that would land. And I think one of the other ones as well there, Billy, was around there was no indexation that was going to be applying to the thresholds as well, which was another massive concern. But if we break down like those key changes, so that it looks like now, again, none of this has gone through and is legislated, but they're proposing that it doesn't start. It was supposed to start this year with the first Div 296 tax bills kind of going out at the end of the financial year, but now they're kicking it back to the 1st of July next year as a commencement. So that would be the first year that it will apply, and in Division 296 will be calculated on total super balances as of 30 June 2027. So we've got some time. But then now they've actually introduced some thresholds. So do you want to break down some of those thresholds, Billy, and what they're looking at changing there?
Yeah, so they're still fixated on the 3 million. So under the proposed changes now, what are the main changes? It's still over 3 mil, it's still a 15% rate, but importantly, it's not on unrealised gains. So it only applies if you sell assets at a profit, and then if you've got that big super balance, you might cop that extra tax. But they brought in a new element here, because obviously, they're concerned now if they just water down the scheme, it'll raise less revenue. So they're like, right, how do we get more revenue? So now they've come up with a new threshold of a $10 million balance, and above that level, the tax rate will be 40%. So all of a sudden we've gone from 15% flat rate on super to now 15%, 30%, 40% for those really big balances. It's not, the unrealized gain thing is gone. And then the other key change is there's indexation. So that 3 million, as inflation goes up, that 3 million will become, 3.2 million, 3.5 million. That will creep up over time. Same with the 10 mil, I presume.
Yeah. And I would think those with over $10 million, though, like a lot of that is going to be illiquid. I would think,
Yes.
That's going to be in property, commercial assets. Maybe like when we did that podcast, we broke down, I forget who it was, the guy that was possibly going to be hit with a humongous Division 296 tax bill that owned shares in a listed company. But again, like that, in that situation, if the balance is over 10 mil and those are liquid assets and there's not a great deal of like net earnings coming off it, or it's just growing in value from a growth perspective, it's kind of irrelevant at that point in time, because there's no tax on the unrealized gain there, which is a real positive. I'd love to see the actual stats on what they're expecting they would actually raise now based upon these changes, like what that unrealized gain component might have actually looked like relative to the realized earnings every year. I don't know if you've seen or heard of any stats around that, Billy, but I'd be really curious to know what that would be now that they've stripped out the unrealized gain, because that would have just been huge. So it's got to be a big dent to how much revenue they would have been raising.
Yeah, well, I mean, this seems to be the trend in politics and governments recently. They try and find ways to tax you where it only affects a small number of people, or it's not affecting their voter base, so they're obviously laser targeting the top sort of 1%, 0.1% of figuring out how they can get a bit more tax out of them. But you're right. I mean, in the short term, you can't see it raising much revenue at all, because those who do have the giant balances, they're not going to be in any rush to sell those assets and pay the tax.
No. Yeah, no, totally agree. And I seen another point as well that was mentioned around for defined benefits and getting a bit of equalization amongst how they were going to be treated, which it sounds like that's a positive move as well. Because from memory, there was actually a carve out there, I thought, for politicians and judges. So like Division 296 wasn't going to really apply and be applicable in that situation. But I haven't dug much deeper into it, but there was some update I seen come through for defined benefit schemes. So they were going to figure out a relevant tax treatment to ensure like an equal tax outcome for defined benefits. Now, I don't know if that meant for all of the politicians' defined benefits, if they were still carving themselves out of that. But yeah, overall, it was really good to see that when that came through. I think on Monday or Tuesday earlier this week, and yeah, nevertheless, it's all moving in the right direction. But I think the key thing to note there is, again, none of this is actually legislated, and nor was it legislated. And we were chatting just before we went live here, Billy, on one of the things you've got to look out for is when the government is throwing out these policies and ideas, you can't go too early on some of this stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Like we have it all the time with clients, right? Like they hear in the media or read stuff in the media, hear politicians talking, and we get it a lot. Like, do I need to do something with my super? There's all these new taxes coming. And firstly, if you're not anywhere near that 3 mil, then it's really not something to spend much time at all on. And secondly, just because something's in the media or a politician says something, or even if in this case they draft legislation, did all the work, it's still not passing through. So you don't need to overreact to these things. Like, until they become law, there's a good chance that, you know, that these things just don't come into, they don't get through Parliament, and actually they're not something you need to worry about, you know.
Mm. And at me first, Dan, I don't know if you know of any clients, like I had no one, fortunately, that started taking money out of superannuation in preparation for it, but, you know, read articles of, you know, some doctors and professionals that, you know, were clearly worried about this coming in, and then they started withdrawing money from the superannuation system. Now, you can't get that back in easily, and you might not even be able to get it back in, is the problem there. And it actually reminds me of a couple of clients I was going to work with a few years back, who did not a large superannuation balance, but whereby you need to be really careful of taking money out of superannuation and getting it back in. So what they basically did is they before they met me, they triggered the bring forward rule. So they put in the I think at the time it was it would have been $330,000 is the maximum amount you could put into superannuation on an after tax basis. And they got it into superannuation, and then they had some bills they had to pay for their business because they had sold some business assets, and it was in I forget how that. Well, they needed money. They just needed money. And then they couldn't, then they decided to pull the money out that they just contributed in. So they triggered the bring forward, put 330 in, and then pulled the whole 330 out, and then came to me and said, hey, we want to retire. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, let's think about how much money we can get into super and time this to perfection. Lo and behold, they'd already triggered the bring forward rule. Couldn't get any money into superannuation for another 3 years. So they'd shot themselves in the foot. And the moral of the story here is, with, you know, people that were taking money out of superannuation, if you've got a large superannuation balance, because of how the total super balance rules work, you may not even be able to contribute into superannuation right now. So you might not even be able to get any more money into your superannuation fund. So yeah, it just goes to show you can't go too early on some of this stuff, because it could really hurt you. And now, if you've taken it out of the superannuation environment, which is taxed at a maximum of 15%, now you've got to be looking at other structures of which aren't taxed as efficiently. So it's not a great scenario.
Spot on. And also, like, even with these changes, let's say the maximum tax rate in super in the future might be 30%, unless you've got a gigantic balance, but let's call it 30%. The maximum personal tax rate is 47. So even with these changes, super's generally where you want most of your assets to be in retirement. So to your point, you don't just rip money out of super unless you've got a really clear plan on what you're going to do with that money.
Yeah, I'd love to know if some advisors were giving some advice around that. I'd hope not. I hope no advisors were telling their clients to do it. But ultimately, you can't stop a client doing what they want with their money as well. So if a client wants to pull money out, as much as us as the advisors can tell them no, if they want to do it, it's their money. You can't ultimately stop them. But really, obviously, really good changes. And the key thing to note then is like what it's actually worthy of breaking down, like what realized earnings actually are. So that's like, if you've got money in your superannuation and maybe there's some term deposits or cash in there, well, that would be like the interest that is being generated. So that's like part of your realized earnings. You've got the dividends on the shares that you've got in there. So if you've got some shares and managed funds or ETFs, like some of those will be paying out dividends. So you still are going to be taxed on those. And then there's the rent if you've got property through superannuation. So again, that's realized earnings. And then of course it would be realized capital gains. So that means if you actually sell some assets throughout the year, then those are going to be counted as a part of your realized earnings, which is, I think, just common sense, and that's how it always should have been structured and set up to be.
Yeah, 100% agree. Yeah, and probably the last one there is like managed funds or exchange traded funds. They'll pay when they pay distributions or dividends, there'll often be capital gains packaged up in that.
Yeah, worthy of noting. That's where most funds will send out tax statements and things every year to sort of show you how that is then declared and counted from a taxation point of view. But if we then talk about superannuation as an actual structure, which we have done from time to time, but then, why is it so appealing for building and managing wealth? Like, do you want to high level explain that? Talking to someone that doesn't know anything about superannuation, Billy, like what's the appeal? Why do we use it? Who's it for? And what are some of the key, factors to consider there around getting money in and taxes?
Yeah, it's a big question. So like we spend, it's interesting. We spend a huge amount of time on super. And every now and then we'll get a client who's like, yeah, I'm not really interested in super. Why do we have to talk about it?
Yeah.
And I just tell people first meeting, when we're going through all the different areas we work with and what we look at and so on, I tell every client, it doesn't matter who you are, your age or balance, we are going to talk about super. You generally don't have a choice. If you're on a salary, money's going into super. So it's silly to ignore that. And B, it's the best place to hold assets in Australia from a tax perspective. The tax rate's 15%, as we've discussed. The tax rate is 10% on a capital gain. And then when you retire, the tax rate is 0%. There's no better alternative. So it's critical to look at it, and we all have it. So why would you ignore it? And if you're approaching that sort of 60, 65 years old age where you actually get full access to your super, usually it makes sense to just get as much money in there as you possibly can, because you're going to then have a zero tax asset in retirement.
Yeah.
So, what is it? It's a tax structure. It's a set of rules. When your money's in super, you choose how it's invested. So it's really just a set of laws and rules around when you can get money in, when you can get it out, what the tax rates are, and then what the money actually does. Well, that's all depending on what investment strategy you've chosen for your super.
Yeah. And what do you reckon why I see it so often whenever I do content around superannuation, there's always the hagglers in the comment section saying that superannuation's a scam and, distrust superannuation, and people commenting that as soon as they hit 60 or they retired, they pull their money straight out of superannuation to clear off their mortgage. Where do you think, what would you put down some of that distrust to, Billy, you reckon? Do you reckon that's all forced from the government constantly making changes to the superannuation system, where there's still a lot of people that just don't understand and don't trust superannuation overall?
There's definitely a lack of understanding, but with those comment section trolls, and it's funny, so there's a guy I saw on TikTok who comes in and says super is a scam in the comment section every time I say anything about it. I saw him on other content creators, in other people's profiles, saying same thing. It's a scam. It's a scam. So it's just like his full-time job, just roaming the comment section is to yell it out. I'd say most of the time, firstly, it's not someone who's, approaching 60 or in retirement. Because if you are, you realize this is my money. It's actually quite important. Yeah. So it's probably someone who's young, and it's probably someone with a low balance. And it's always just a lack of understanding how the system works, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And, government changing it is always the concern of changing the rules and, how much you can put in, the accessing it. And I think because some people also think that the government has that money and it's kind of their money and they sort of control it for you in a way where it's it's not actually like that. All funds are they're regulated. It's your money that you're sacrificing or getting withheld from your pay to go into your superannuation. But it is worthy of noting that the government does set rules around how you can access it, when you can access it, and how much you can access from certain ages. When you're 65, you can start taking out 5%, and it's actually mandated when you start a pension account, which is the retirement account in super, you must start taking out 5%. And I think that's where sometimes people do get a little bit confused, thinking about is that the government feeding me the money, or how does that work? But it's just no, these are just kind of the rules of how you use the accounts. And even, okay, if you don't need that 5%, well, you still have to take it out, but you can, in some ways, always look at maybe recycling it back and contributing it back into superannuation, which is something I see people sometimes get a little bit concerned about, because they say, look, I don't need the money, and I don't want to draw down on my superannuation, so why would I start a pension account? But like you were saying before, Billy, you can basically put your money inside super, and when you're in retirement phase, it's tax-free up to $2 million per person. So if you're in a couple, $4 million, you can invest tax-free through super. You can't beat it.
And you have full access. It's not locked up.
Yeah, exactly right. And you can get it back into superannuation, deployed in other ways. But the other part is, like, for a lot of young clients I work with, like I've got some business owners in their 20s and 30s now, where they're not actually paying themselves any super. And then it's like, okay, well, should you pay yourself any superannuation if you're young and you're scaling a business? That's an interesting question. What do you reckon about
a little bit? Usually a little bit, right? Because it's an easy win on a tax saving, and it's just a nice, okay, I'm starting to do a little bit that's going to really take care of me later in life. But we've spoken about this before. Any clients who are under, let's say, 50 years old, we never have super as the only wealth creation strategy, right? That's never the only thing. We always want to do other things. We're never telling clients every extra cent you've got, just pile it into super, unless they're like really close to that access age.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like, you can do more than one thing, right? It's not all super or ignore super and only do this other thing. Like, it's just one of your strategies. It's one of your tools, and it's pretty much the most tax effective one there is. So let's use it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And that's where a lot of business owners, maybe they neglect their super at the beginning, but then once they scale their business up and get a lot more profitable and more money flowing, and they can start actually paying themselves properly out of the business, well, then a lot of accountants are going to tell you to try and put 30 grand in per year to claim from a tax perspective, because it's can be a bit of a no-brainer, but of course it does always come down to your individual circumstances, goals, and whatever you are obviously trying to achieve. But before we close out, Billy, what about talking about opportunities or planning steps people should be considering before 2026? Not necessarily just Div 296 related. Anything that comes to mind?
Well, I mean, with Div 296, it's only if you're anywhere near that 3 mil plus that you need to worry about this. Mm-hmm. And again, it's not legislated, so the whole policy could vanish. Like, I've seen it happen many times before. If you're anywhere near the 3 mil, definitely make sure you're getting professional advice on what action should be taken, if anything.
Yeah.
If you're not near the 3 mil, I really don't think you need to worry about Div 296 at all, to be honest. One strategy that I think you like as well is if you're a member of a couple where one of you has a big super balance and the other one has a very small super balance. Like, let's say one of you has, $1 million in super and the other one's got 100 grand. There's a strategy called contribution splitting, where you can have the high income earner can actually redirect pretty much all their super contributions into their partner's account. And so if you do that over time, you can get a bit more equalization in your balances, and it protects you. Like, if a future government wants to further restrict how much you can have in a tax-free super or tax-free pension account, it probably makes sense to try and equalize to some degree, because all these rules are all based on individuals. So like, even if you're in a couple, all the rules are like, maximum. Like, this extra tax rate, it's $3 million per person. It's not per couple.
Yeah.
So equalization of balances is always something to consider.
You've stolen my thunder there, Billy. That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to talk about it because I've got a client I literally just seen yesterday who is exactly in that situation where, because the wife's been off looking after, some kids over the years, like, there's a massive gap in superannuation balance, but they're a similar age as well. So it's more around trying to equal out those balances into the future to, one, future-proof against, Division 296 if that literally happens, and then maybe the caps are lower in future, trying to future-proof yourself there a little bit, but also to ensure that those balances are a bit more equal from a contribution point of view as well. So because you don't want to get too large of a balance, and then one person's knocked out from basically being able to make any superannuation contributions. That's also where that spouse splitting contribution strategy can come in, or if there is a big age gap as well. That's commonly where I might use that strategy. Say someone's, I don't know, 45, and then the other part of the spouse is 53, let's just say. We might split across the younger person's contributions, depending upon the balances, to the older person in the couple's account, with the view that the older person will reach 60 sooner, and therefore they're going to be able to access their superannuation sooner and possibly trigger their account to be tax-free sooner. So it's like we're trying to get more money into that account so that it can be more tax optimized and accessible sooner as well. So that spouse splitting strategy can actually work in a lot of different ways, from a tax point of view, equaling out balances, potentially future-proofing yourself on Division 296 or anything of sorts. There's a lot of different use cases in that. And the other part I was going to say is, like, yeah, if you do have large assets and money sitting inside superannuation, that's where you might want to actually look at all of your structures that you've got in place. So you've probably and maybe already got a family trust as well. And if you've got a large superannuation balance, I'm going to assume you're going to be a little bit older. So you've probably got some adult kids maybe hanging around, maybe. And therefore, that's where some of your distributions, maybe through to adult kids through a trust, can become relevant. But you've got to be careful on that, because the ATO is cracking down on those distributions, particularly if those kids are not dependent upon you in any way now and they're off living their own lives. So you've really got to get some good advice around all of that. But I think it sort of just falls part of just, your annual sort of financial check-in, of just always being on top and checking your structures in place and making sure it's all still relevant and based on what the government's changed and where you're at and how you're feeling about life, and has your goals and objectives changed in any way, shape or form, because that might mean we need to change things around just purely based upon that. So any other points to mention, Billy, before we close out?
Just don't pay too much attention to these politicians. Just wait until it's law, I think that's the key lesson here. So much talk. They've been talking about this for almost 3 years, and still, and now they're back to the drawing board, by the way. Like, these changes, I doubt the work's been done on how to actually implement it. It's quite complicated. That's probably why they've pushed the whole date out a whole nother year. So let's not hold our breath for too much.
Imagine that was your job, coming up with schemes like this to tax Aussies more, and you had to figure out the intricacies of this. Like, God, I couldn't think of a worse job, could you?
Not the most fulfilling, way to live your life. I wouldn't have thought.
No. Like, what do you do for a living? I figure out how to just tax Australians more, basically, and figure out how to best structure it. Like, I wonder who come up with the unrealized gain idea. Like, what were they sitting in a room together, and someone had the brainiac idea of going, let's tax assets that haven't been sold just on those gains, and everyone's like, that's a great idea. We can just get away with this, and everyone's going to be like, let's go. It's pretty crazy to think about that when you think about how they thought that Australians were just going to sort of roll over, and even the financial advice industry did a lot of lobbying at government here to ensure that this didn't go through. Like, I don't know, what were they expecting there?
Oh, well, I heard them use the word reform, tax reform, which is insane, because this is a whole new layer of laws and complexity added on top of what's already there. So nothing's being enhanced or improved or streamlined or reformed at all. It's just how can we just grab a little bit more tax off those big balances?
Yeah.
So we don't want to think about these things too much.
No, not at all. And again, no wonder.
But it keeps us busy, right? Like, all this complexity. Yeah. We just get
busy. It really does. And it talks to the point of, like, last week's podcast, like, why people are looking offshore, because they're they get fed up of the highest tax rates. Some of the highest tax rates that we have in the world are here in Australia, and then these constant goalposts being changed. Like, no wonder people look at those different countries in the UAE and Singapore and other ways to hold more onto the the money that you're ultimately earning. So it's like you said, Billy, it keeps us busy though. So it keeps us constantly on the move and keeping our clients informed and doing as much as we ultimately can for them at the same time. But we'll wrap up and bring it to a close. So appreciate everyone that is listening in to the podcast, and if you're getting value out of what we are talking about, please give us 5 5 stars on Spotify and Apple. If there's any topics that you want covered, feel free to reach out. It's probably even Billy or myself. Personally, you can find us on all of the different social media channels or go through to our website directly and you can drop some notes in there. And as always, if you want to chat about your personal situation, you can always reach out to any of the advisors, Billy or myself, or any of the other advisors in the team, or other advisors, of course, Australia-wide, if you needed any help in terms of your personal situation and getting on track. But yeah, before we close out, Billy, any plans, anything exciting for the weekend?
Well, no, I mean, last night I met a few of my friends at the pub and we did a NBA fantasy draft.
So what did that look like?
Just a few middle-aged guys sitting there having a steak and with their laptops, and everyone made fun of me because I came straight from work. So I had my little soft briefcase and my business attire. Everyone else was in shorts and t-shirts. So
Nice.
I looked the part, but I had no idea because I don't have time to watch basketball. So I didn't.
Do you like wager on that internally between you, or what's the go there?
Oh, we just put in $50 each or something for the season, and winner takes it at the end.
Yeah, nice. When's the season actually starting? I don't follow basketball at all, mind you. Is the season started or is it about to start?
Well, I only know because we had our draft last night, so it starts in a few days.
Okay. Oh, that's good. Well, I wasn't up to any of that last night, and we're just doing a lot of little things around the house at the moment. So I'm not the most handiest on the tools, but lucky I've got my father-in-law who sort of leads the way, and we're nearly done out the back on this little bit of a renovation we've been doing on the alfresco area. So I've been learning a lot. I tell you what, I've been learning heaps. Getting the hands busy on the tools. So I'll be doing a bit of that tomorrow, and other than that, looking forward to getting back into the office Monday.
Awesome. We'll see you.
Cool, mate. See you next time on the Winners Playbook.
Disclaimer. The information contained in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into account your personal circumstances. Please head to the show notes if you wish to book in a free 15-minute call to discuss your personal situation.